Welcome back. Now, the government has a Big Four agenda that it seeks to implement. One of the pillars of this particular Big Four agenda is manufacturing. Key to note is that in 2017, the manufacturing sector contributed about 8.4% to Kenya's GDP, and the government seeks to push that to 15% by 2022. We are now joined by a panel here to discuss that particular manufacturing agenda. To my immediate left is Rajul Malde. He is the Commercial Director of Pwani Oil. Welcome to the set.
Thank you very much.
Next to him is Dhanani. He is the Managing Director of Universal Corporation. Welcome to the set, sir.
Thank you.
And to the far left is Tobias Alando. He's the head of Membership Kenya Association of Manufacturers. Welcome to the set, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Now, maybe we can start off with that particular agenda.
Yeah.
15% by 2022.
Yep.
Is it feasible? Let's start with you.
Well, I would say it's an ambitious journey that the government took. It is very possible, and it's possible if key elements are addressed. One of them is competitiveness. The other thing is market access, providing market for these products. The other item is predictability of the environment for doing business. And the last item, of course, is around dealing with counterfeit and related products. But it is very possible because if you look at the world, the top 6 countries that drive the economic growth in this world, that contribute 60% of the world GDP, are very strong in manufacturing sector. So the government is in the right direction in terms of promoting manufacturing, but it needs to address some of these basic issues that will promote the growth of the manufacturing sector.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how about you, Mr. Dhanani? What does that have, what bearing does it have towards the pharmaceuticals where you deal in?
I think it's exactly what Tobias said. There's a lot of policy changes we need. There's a lot of support we need from government. We are in the health or manufacturing of pharmaceuticals. A very small example is India is about 1.2 billion people. It has over 20,000 manufacturers. If policies are made, Kenya is the hub for manufacturing within EAC. And if right policies are made, and if we look at the COMESA market, it's 500-600 million people, but we hardly have 200 manufacturers. There's a big scope, and it is possible, and very much possible.
On matters pharmaceuticals, Kenya is, the pharmaceutical industry in Kenya is the largest in the COMESA region.
At least in sub-Saharan, yes, in many.
But you find that 70% of the market demand in pharmaceuticals is imported. Where is the problem?
The problem is when there's few issues like if there's no level playing field. In majority of these countries in this part of the world, there's a lot of donor-funded programs. Amongst the donor-funded programs, they come in with no duty, no VAT. Forget there's no VAT on medicines anyway, but there is RDL and GOK that's being paid, which they are exempted from. But when a manufacturer in Kenya wants to manufacture that product, we have to pay the RDL and GOK. And a live example right now is we've lost a lot of orders on a small percentage, between 4 and 7%. And at the same time, imports from India and China are subsidized by their own governments. There is no subsidy for us. So if the playing field is made level, I'm sure a lot of manufacturing can happen in pharmaceuticals in this part of the world.
Maybe I can just bring in Mr. Malde. Do you resonate with the sentiments, and what is your experience, especially in your subsector?
Thank you, Betty. I agree to a large extent to what Mr. Dhanani and Tobias have spoken about. I think a couple of different points of view. One of them would be the government has been and has pledged to continue to spend heavily in infrastructure projects in the country. In the process of building infrastructure, it is obviously a long-term process. It will pay its own dividends in time to come. But in the process of infrastructure funding, what seems to have happened within the economy is domestic demand has actually shrunk. Money circulation in the market has slowed down. That has created a lack of demand. Consumption patterns for necessity products or commodities like ours in the food sector, in the edible oil sector, have actually shrunk in the year 2018, and we see that trend happening in 2019. And the core of the problem lies in ensuring that there is sufficient amount of money that is being pumped into the economy through infrastructure, through subsidies to farmers, through subsidies on fertilizers, etc., that money continues to circulate and create domestic demand. The problem is, if the government spending is all channeled or funding infrastructure alone, which then doesn't come back into the economy, domestic demand doesn't grow, then the manufacturing agenda is at a very high risk. Manufacturing capacity growth can only happen when it is coupled with demand and consumption. The problem here is, on the one side, we want to push manufacturing, on the other, we're not creating demand for it. The common external tariffs within the East African community are currently in a bad state. The applicable rules of origin and so on within the East African community isn't really working. Each partner state doing its own excise duties and non-tariff barriers and so on. So whilst domestic demand is shrinking, export demand is being killed by partner states within the EAC. And I think the government needs to take a stand. I think the government needs to play big daddy and not young brother, and really make it clear to the partners that if it's got to work on a level playing field across East Africa. Otherwise, it's not going to work, and we'll all go to price competition or technology competition and do what we have to do. Only then there is a way forward for the manufacturing agenda for me.
Okay. Tobias, maybe you can tell us, as Kenya Association of Manufacturers,
Yes.
you represent the manufacturers,
Correct.
and I believe you have these conversations with the government.
Yes.
What is the government doing to deal with the business environment, to better the business environment for manufacturers?
We did an analysis in terms of competitiveness, and we realized we are about 12 and 13% uncompetitive compared to our regional counterparts. And this is because of issues like IDF, RDL, Railway Development Levy, import declaration fees that we pay. There is a lot of issues around VAT refund, and many manufacturing companies are owed a lot of money. So it stifles expansion in relation to that. So we've had a conversation with the government, and remember we identified 4 key areas that we needed the government to address. One of them was competitiveness. Under competitiveness, we realized we are 13% uncompetitive. So there is a conversation to address some of those urgent areas that will make us competitive in one way or the other. What the government has done, and we commend them, is to address the issue of counterfeit. Though it has brought also a lot of bottlenecks in one way or the other, but in the long run, the mechanism they have put in place has sort of created an atmosphere where the genuine manufacturers are going to gain in one way or the other. In terms of market access, as Rajul has mentioned, we have a lot of problems in exporting certain products because of rules of origin application by our counterparts. What the government has done is develop an export market strategy, which will see an opportunity for other areas of export for our products. The signing and ratification of African Continental Trade Agreement is a plus to our country, because we are looking at about a population of 1.2 billion in Africa. We are looking at GDP of 2 billion plus, 2 trillion plus US dollars in Africa. So an opportunity to look at other markets rather than our common markets that we rely on, where we have a problem. So there are conversations and there are processes that have been initiated to address those key areas. But I think it is a movement that is slow, but it is in the right direction. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe, Mr. Dhanani, what would you tell us about the fact that the pharmaceutical industry, much as it is in manufacturing, it has a big bearing in universal health coverage? What
Yes.
do you think is your role in that, the pharmaceutical industry?
I think we are supposed to make affordable quality medicines. And in all this, access is the biggest. Over and above affordability, if price is affordable, you need good accessibility as well. And I think we are all geared up as the local industry to get into that line. So our biggest challenge is the market, like you're saying, the demand. The demand is there, but there are so many gaps within the system that needs to be rectified. And for sure, potential is there. And I think as local manufacturers, we have also made a lot of progressive steps towards quality. Now, for example, we are the only WHO pre-qualified plant in Kenya. So there is, and that shows quality. And there are several others who are going to join in. So we have, as manufacturers, tried to bring in, and I think we now need the Buy Kenya, Build Kenya policy to be implemented, the procurement guidelines to be done, because it favors also importers today. And clearly, procurement guidelines favoring local manufacturers should be clearly different from the import sector. So if those things, small things fixes are done, and level playing field, we are ready to bring in affordable medicines to the country.
Okay. Maybe since he has mentioned Buy Kenya, Build Kenya, the government is maybe, do they Buy Kenya, Build Kenya?
Yes, we've seen traction in two key sectors. One is leather and footwear, where you see government is the largest procurer of items. So we've had a conversation with the Ministry of Industrialization, and we've seen traction in terms of supply of police uniform and any other uniformed agency in the country. And the textile and leather sector in this country have been given an opportunity, a free tendering opportunity to provide the uniforms to government. So we are seeing traction in terms of that. It has started with two sectors. We are hoping that all other sectors will also benefit in terms of Buy Kenya, Build Kenya. But apart from government also, we want also to tell our citizens that you need to buy the locally produced goods. We have companies in this country that are producing world-class products that are even exported to Europe and other continents. We need to be proud of that, and we need to insist on buying our local products.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe Mr. Rajul, you can tell us in the edible sector, in the edible oil sector, is the Buy Kenya, Build Kenya narrative, how does it play out? Do Kenyans buy Kenya, build Kenya, or do they go outside?
Well, as long as the choices in the market are available for consumption, so for example, if we talk about vegetable oils, the vegetable oil market is 99% of the market is actually products from within manufacturers in Kenya. But if you talk about olive oil, for example, then there isn't any manufacturer in Kenya, and therefore the Kenyan consumer who's an olive oil consumer doesn't have a choice really to buy Kenyan, build Kenya. And for that segment of the market, there isn't any opportunity, unfortunately. But apart from that, any other cooking oil, if you take sunflower oil or corn oil or soya oil, vegetable oil, all available in Kenya, made by Kenyan manufacturers on the Kenyan shelves. Though imported products are available from other countries, which are on the shelf, but they command a very small market share. So in that sense, I would say we are 95-96% Buy Kenyan, Build Kenya, and as far as edible oils is concerned.
Okay, that's a good thing. What is your comment maybe on counterfeit in the Kenyan market?
It was a huge problem. In as far as counterfeits is concerned, what we had actually was not essentially counterfeit, but it was non-conforming to the Kenya Bureau of Standards requirements of quality and health. What we had was products coming into the country through our ports, which weren't fortified with the right quantity and amounts of vitamins A and D, which is a Kenya Bureau standard requirement, and sometimes not having paid the legitimate import duties and VAT and so on, and found its way into the market. And again, I support what Tobias said earlier. We actually congratulate the government for having taken the initiative, and our president in particular, to set up the multi-government agency team to look at the counterfeit and non-conforming products and really stamp it down from around about May, if I'm not mistaken, last year. And we've seen significant progress in that respect in the edible oils and bar soap sector.
Okay. How about the pharmaceutical sector? Maybe you can help Kenyans understand. Most of them think that generic products are counterfeit products. Maybe
Yes,
you can
I think.
start there and tell us the effect in the industry.
I think there's a big misconception about generics and counterfeits.
Okay.
Generics actually are a copy of the originator with all the tests done against the originator product and passes all the tests in terms of efficacy, safety, and gives the right treatment. So generics are not counterfeits. Counterfeits are copies of the original. So you have a product, let's say a Eveready battery, and you get another Eveready battery, not just a battery. That's a counterfeit. So there is no data available on what sort of counterfeits are available in the market, but I think if we have to demystify the two. Counterfeits and generics are two different. Generics are very safe to use as the originator product.
Okay. And maybe you can tell us,
Yes.
Counterfeits, the anti-counterfeiting agency,
Yes.
they keep nabbing quite a number of counterfeit goods.
Correct.
This affects the market. It denies legit manufacturers
Yes.
their market share.
Correct.
What is the association doing, or what are you lobbying for in tackling counterfeit?
I think one of the things that we are very vocal about is commend the multi-agency team for their work, because that has created a sense of responsibility for the consumer and even for the manufacturer. Generally, we only know about counterfeits, but there is also the contraband goods, there is illicit goods, there is a substandard goods. All these contribute to what we call competitiveness in terms of the genuine guy who has paid duty, who is using the right raw material, and you want to compete with somebody who is importing a substandard item or using substandard raw material and selling his products or her products at a cheaper price. So we want to commend the multi-agency team because it has created a sense of responsibility to the citizen. But apart from that, the anti-counterfeit agency has been doing random raids, as you witnessed recently. They were in the streets looking at shops, because we have a lot of counterfeit products that are being sold in the market. And they're also creating awareness to the consumers that you need to be a responsible consumer, that you need to differentiate between counterfeit, original, substandard, and illicit products. So as a government entity that is mandated to deal with counterfeit, they're doing a good job, and we commend. As an association, we do provide intelligence whenever we get it to the government agency mandated for this, and then they conduct their raid. But as we speak right now, I think the consumers are aware, and those fake manufacturers, they have no more space to do whatever they used to do, which is a plus for the industries in this country.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
Of course, we cannot, this conversation cannot be complete if we do not discuss the small and medium enterprises.
Correct.
You find that the interest rate cap locked quite a number of them from accessing credit. Now, manufacturing is quite a capital-intensive venture.
Yes.
How will the SMEs pan out in implementing the manufacturing agenda? Do they have a place? What can be done to improve their access to credit? Let's start with you.
First, I would say that within the organization, within Kenya Association of Manufacturers, we have deliberately and created a segment that admits small and medium enterprises. So we have a new category that admits small and medium enterprise as part of membership within KM. We have created a value proposition in terms of how we intend to support them. But what we are doing is we are working with the related partners, like the banking sectors. They, based on the interest rate cap and all that, they are looking at other avenues to support these smaller companies. Because if you look at it in a broader sense, for some of them, it's not really financial support that is required. It's an assumption that they really requires financial support. But in real sense, some of them really require technological support, market access, route to market. They require to be helped to grow and to sell their products, to produce their products to the right quality and standard. And we are doing that as an association.
Okay.
Yeah.
And for you, Mr. Rajul, the agro-processing is an important part of the agriculture pillar of the Big Four agenda that cannot be ignored, and it is in manufacturing. How do you think that will pan out, and especially incorporating the SMEs?
In my opinion, firstly, coming to the earlier question on interest capping, I think part of the domestic demand issue that I spoke about earlier is actually stemmed from the interest capping. It is that interest capping that has resulted in SMEs and smaller traders who are not able to access liquidity from the market, from the banking sector, and that has caused a lack of money circulation within the economy and added to the whole issue of lack of domestic demand. Coming back to the agro-processing and the agriculture pillar and the SME part of it, the issue is twofold. One is, whilst the government is focused around infrastructure in terms of roads and rail, pipelines, etc., I think the government needs to look at technology in agro-processing, look at how to bring in some kind of consistency in harvesting and not be reliant on our weather patterns. So what can we do in as far as irrigation is concerned, for example? What can we do in as far as drip is concerned, for example? What can we do in as far as converting more of our barren lands into fertile lands, as another example? And the more vegetation or plantable land we create, the more agricultural produce we will get. The problem we have is, how do we make it fertile? And technology out there is miles ahead of what we've implemented in our farms in Kenya today. So I think apart from infrastructural development, there must be some kind of effort to bring that technology to the small and medium-sized enterprises who are looking to earn a living out of agro-processing. On the other side of the coin for me, how do we then add value to the product that we would then grow within our country? And that value addition is where the SME sector can play a huge role. So the mamambogas out there, what else can they do outside of that mamamboga on the roadsides that they sell on? And how else can they add value? So can they convert that fresh vegetable into a finished meal, as an example? And that's the thought process for me that will add value to agro-processing and the SME sector.
Okay. Well, what is your thought on that? SMEs in the pharmaceuticals industry, do they have a place?
SMEs in the pharmaceutical sector more or less is on the distribution side.
Okay.
Because to run a pharmaceutical industry, if you don't have the right capacity, it's very difficult. So it can have a lot of effect on ancillary industry, because there are a lot of packaging things that we must buy locally. So there are the small industries that can be affiliated to pharma, but not actually manufacturing of pharma. So it's the distribution chain and the ancillary industry to pharma requirements, packaging mainly.
Okay, maybe we can talk about the cost of production. Someone online I have seen, he's called Kevin Aderi. He is asking, what is the impact of increase in fuel tax to production costs and the growth in the manufacturing sector? What is your view on that?
Well, if you look at general manufacturing, there are specific industries that would be directly affected with either reduction or increase in fuel because their production process is more reliant on fuel consumption. For example, the cements of this world, the cement sector is an example, the steel sector is an example. Those are two sectors that the fuel cost has a large impact. The other sectors would have indirect impact because of the fuel cost adjustment of the electricity bill. So in one or the other, it does affect the production cost, either to take it high or low. So it does affect the production cost. And I know the question that people normally ask is the fuel cost has gone down. Why are the products prices of the products not going down? Now there are other factors that contribute to the pricing of a product. The assumption that it's only fuel is not there and should not be there. There are other factors that contribute to the cost and the pricing of a related products. So it's not only fuel cost and all that. So if the fuel cost goes down, for example, and you have the logistic cost is still up, you have the element of taxation, because we've not talked about one of the challenges, which is the county taxes, numerous and predictable taxes. So there are other factors that would attribute to the price of a product rather than just the fuel cost. Yeah.
Okay. And now that you've mentioned county taxes, how does that affect you?
I think it's not only the county tax, but there's so much over-regulation. When we talk of the licenses or regulatory bodies, you've got the county taxes to pay, you've got to pay the Kenya Bureau of Standards, you've got regulated by Pharmacy Poisons Board. There's so many other barriers. And I think somehow we need to come out with a single window system to make business easy for the... And it's not a matter of the licenses or the fees. I think it can be harmonized into simpler methodologies. Yes, regulation is required, but over-regulation may not be too good. And that also affects...
Just to add on to what he's saying, in fact, now we're shifting the conversation. I know the government has done pretty well on ease of doing business. Now we need to address the cost of doing business. If we address the cost of doing business, definitely the competitive of manufacturing and the growth of manufacturing and our contribution, the ambition to raise our contribution to the GDP to 15% will come to a reality. And I think that's what we are right now pushing. Let's address the cost of doing business in this country.
Cost of doing business.
Yes.
What is your view on the same?
I think if we talk about the fuel tax, in a very different manner, what the fuel tax has done is to actually tell manufacturers to start innovation, start looking at alternative fuel sources, renewable energy, and things like those. And that's actually a very good thing because that now improves technology and actually reduces cost of production. But when we talk about cost of doing business overall, then if we were to compare cost of power in Kenya versus cost of power in Ethiopia, for example, in Kenya we are approximately 3 times more expensive per unit of power as compared to Ethiopia. So whilst government is spending on infrastructure, what is it doing to bring in cheaper sources of power? So hydroelectric dams, for example, or geothermal power plants, for example, and sources like those. Whilst the tax has encouraged manufacturers to look for renewable sources, can the government do the same and provide infrastructure for industry to deliver on the manufacturing and the industrialization agenda on the side of cost of production, but then on the side of the bureaucracy and the cost of doing business, what is it that the government needs to do to harmonize the legalities and compliance requirements such that we don't have 10 different agencies looking at a manufacturer from different angles? So you've got EHS, you've got Kenya Bureau of Standards, you've got county public health, you've got county NEMA, county environment, then you've got NEMA, then you've got your national Kenya Revenue Authority requirements, then you've got your customs and excise requirements, then you've got your single business permits, your distribution licenses, your branding licenses, etc., etc. I mean, for that, we actually have to look at employment of administrators to ensure that there is compliance. If there is no compliance, then sometimes rather than acting as a facilitator for business, the agencies actually act as policemen of the business, which is the other problem that manufacturers face. So what can we do to deal with these kinds of legally illegal things that happen in our economy?
Okay. I'm glad you mentioned the renewable energy. Maybe what is your view on securing the future of the manufacturing industry in Kenya? What is the future looking like?
The future is great. The future is brilliant. The future is bright. There's no doubt about that. In my opinion, the rate at which the population in the continent of Africa is growing stands to be the biggest market that the world will have in the next 5-10 years to come. So the geographical location of Kenya, the already fantastic growth and progress that the country has already made, the huge infrastructure development projects that the government is currently spending on, the Big Four agenda, although it has its own issues as we've discussed earlier, but the clarity is there of thought and the intentions are correct and we're going towards the right direction. For me, all that is a plus. For me, the future is bright, the country will flourish, and there's no doubt about it. Okay. The question is how soon, and therefore what can we play in terms of private-public partnership to be able to make it sooner rather than later.
Okay. Your views on the future of the manufacturing industry?
I think, as Rajul said, that's definitely a bright future for the country. And with the Big Four agenda, I mean, a lot of things can be done. And again, as you said, it's the speed of doing that. Everything is on the right track. It's just the speed at which we can make those changes to make growth in the industry.
Okay, we can close with you on that.
I think the future is bright, and we've seen the leadership of His Excellency the President by identifying manufacturing as one of the key pillars, and having this conversation of manufacturing growth presents a very good opportunity to have expansion of our local industries and to create more jobs. The only way to create more jobs in this country is to strengthen and establish manufacturing farms. And that is what we need to drum around. If you compare the youth in this country and in other countries, the technical competence and skills that we have, if fully utilized in the manufacturing industries, then Kenya will be another country that everyone will admire.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's where we close it, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for making time to discuss the manufacturing agenda tonight on KBC. Well, that was it on the interview on the manufacturing agenda. That was Paul Dhanani, MD for Universal Corporation, with Tobias Alando, Head of Membership, Kenya Association of Manufacturers, as well as Rajul Malde, the Commercial Director for Pwani Oil.